workshops that we're doing this semester. I know that I met a bunch of you last year, but I'm looking forward to getting to know some of you this year too. To all of the new students, welcome. To folks who aren't new to Sweet Briar but are new to me, welcome. I'm going to pop a couple of links in the chat, and there are going to be things to help you throughout tonight's workshop. So first is the one that's actually at that button at the top of your screen, and it's the anonymous Q&A button. So if you want to ask something anonymously, you don't want to put it in the chat, then you can go ahead and click that thing at the top of the screen and I'll get your question over here totally anonymously. Now, the next one is really important. I know it's going to be the thing that y'all care about more than any other link I send you for the rest of the night tonight. And this is the raffle link. And I want y'all to go ahead and take a minute to fill out this raffle form, because the raffle form is how you win a prize. And we have 10 really awesome prizes for you tonight, ranging from vibrators to books to shirts to prints to a lot of vibrators and bottles of lube. There's so many different things. So go ahead, click the workshop raffle button and submit your entry, because the only way to win is to fill out that form. So it's a pretty important form. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting for your responses to come in, and I'm gonna watch them pop up on my other screen over here, I want to introduce myself, because some of you know me, but some of you don't. My name is Cassandra, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a sex educator, which is why I'm going to be here talking to you a lot this year about sex and sexuality in so many different ways. Now, I trained at an organization called SHIP that used to be known as the Center for Sexual Pleasure and Health. And that training basically means that for me, we cannot separate conversations about sexual health from conversations about sexual pleasure. Those two things go hand in hand. And it's not just me saying that. The World Health Organization actually has a lot to say about it too. But we'll cover more of that next week in the Playing Safely workshop. I'm also the host of a YouTube series called You Deserve Good Sex, and there will be times today and in your resource documents that you'll get after the workshop where I'm going to refer to videos in that series. And that's because even though we have a couple of hours together today, we don't have a ton of time to unpack all of these things. But that series has a ton of videos to help keep the learning going, so they'll be linked in your resource sheet. I also have experience as a victim advocate. And that means that when we're talking about sex and communication and pleasure and safety, I'm always thinking about how survivors might be engaging in those conversations. Because for me, conversations about violence and recovery and how we heal as people and how we communicate and how we understand our boundaries and our possibility for pleasure and for orgasm and all the fun things that we think about, they're all actually part of one big ecosystem. But I'm also really passionate about lube. You're not going to get my lube rant today. I promise it will be here. It will happen later. Those of you who have been here with me before know the lube rant. You know that it's coming. But expect some of it next week. Expect even more of it in February for the For Pleasure's Sake workshop. I can see so many of you making sure that you go in this field or on this link rather and fill out this this sheet. Look at you. Somebody else just finished filling out this form. That's awesome. I'd love to have everybody fill out the raffle form because we have 10 prizes per workshop. You have 4 workshops this year. That's 40 prizes. It's a lot of chances to win vibrators and other things, some of which are they cost like up to $150, $175. You've got some pretty cool prizes here today. Now, we do have some expectations other than just, I really want you to fill out this raffle prize form. First, you're here probably in your own rooms on campus or in your off-campus apartments or sitting next to a friend or to a partner. But if you need to take a break, I can't see you. I don't care. Just do it. Go to the bathroom if you have to. If you need to go get a snack, go make a cup of tea, do whatever, do that. It's totally okay. That's the beauty of this being an online workshop. You're not going to interrupt anything. So go ahead and just do what you need to do. Take care of your body. I'm also going to be using language that for some of you is going to feel really familiar, and for others, it might feel a little more like, whoa, what's happening here? So I'm going to be saying things like partners, not assuming that there's any kind of romantic connection between you and that partner, but anybody who you're having any type of sexual interaction with, even if you met them 10 minutes ago, is your partner for that experience. I'm also going to be saying things like people with vaginas and people with penises, because our genitals and our gender are two different things, and there's no sense in conflating them. I'm also not going to be assuming that any of your partners are a particular gender or that they have certain body types. So no assumptions are happening here. But I know that for a lot of you, this might be your first time in a sex ed environment like this. When I got some of the anonymous questions that y'all have been sending in over the week, that was really clear, right? Not because you don't know things, but simply because there were a lot of things like, can we please talk about this thing? I've been waiting my whole life to talk about it and nobody has. So you might be feeling a little queasy in the body. You might be feeling a little nervous or a little excited or just a sense of butterflies, and you might not totally know what that feeling is. So if you start to feel a little unsettled or a little sweaty or like you feel like you're going to throw up, pay attention to what we're talking about right before that feeling started. It's worth checking in with that feeling later and seeing if it's excitement or if it's joy, enthusiasm, or anxiety, or if you've been triggered. All of those things are valid and they are all worth your attention. Now, this next thing is really, really critical. I am talking into a black box right now. I am staring into 6 light bulbs and a green dot, and I'm watching your raffle questions, your raffle form and anonymous questions come in on another screen. I really need you to laugh at me. And yes, I am processing this with my therapist, but I need you to engage with me here because I can't see you. You're all cameras off. So use that chat in your lower right-hand corner for those of you who are on a laptop or on a tablet or whatever. If you're on mobile, you might have to tap around a couple of buttons to find the chat. But go ahead and say, hey, let me know that you are out there because I need you to talk to me. I need you to laugh at me. And it's okay to laugh in this context. It's okay to feel playful. It is okay to chat. Thank you to the person who is already sort of sarcastically laughing at me. I love you. I appreciate you. Hello to everyone saying hello. Now, finally, I'm not going to lie to you, and these two things go together. So if I don't know the answer to one of your questions, then we can connect afterwards and I can try to find you some resources to help because I don't know everything. Similarly, if we talk about things tonight, I'm not saying you have to go do the thing. I'm not saying that's what you have to do. I'll just be providing you information so that if you want to go do the thing, like the person who's having sex workshop and chill tonight. So if you want to go do it, you can, right? You have the tools to be able to do that in a safe, enjoyable, lower vulnerability way. So education, not endorsement. Just because we talk about butt plugs doesn't mean that you have to go and use one, but you can if you want, right? We'll talk about that more next week. Not so much tonight. And finally, if you have anonymous questions, again, for those of you who joined late, you can go ahead and click that button at the top of your screen. It'll be there all throughout the workshop, and you can submit an anonymous question that way. And I do see some coming in here now. So thanks for being here with me. Hello, 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 hello to everybody who just said hi in the chat. I really, really appreciate you. One of my favorite things teaching at Sweet Briar, on the internet last year was how chatty you all were and how playful you all were in the chat. It was so exciting for me to get to watch that and see people like really connecting with each other, even virtually. So bring that same energy this year. That's what I love about you. Now, today we've got 3 main sections that we're going to go through. First, the how did we get here, right? Our workshop today is entirely about communication, how we can talk with people about sex, how we can understand different people's contexts. We can't have that conversation without understanding why so many of us feel like we are going to lose it and have a meltdown just when it comes to talking about sex with our partners, with our friends, with our family, here anonymously in a workshop space. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got to that place of feeling simultaneously really curious and pretty nervous too. Then we are going to talk about some communication myths and roadblocks. So the things that keep us from actually talking about what we want, what we like, and what we don't like. And then we are talking strategy for the whole final third, which is actually the whole final half of this workshop. So we'll be giving you some specific techniques so that you can work past the myths and roadblocks, so you can work through the discomfort that you might be feeling. So are y'all ready to get started? Let me know in the chat. Yay, thank you. Look at you with the enthusiasm and the fast typing. I love it. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. You understood the assignment. Thank you. I love it. I love it. All right. So tell me in the chat, when you imagine telling somebody about your sexual desires and your boundaries, the things that you're into, what do you imagine? How does that conversation go? How do you feel having that conversation? How do your partners feel in that conversation? Kind of awkward. Tell me a little bit about that. What does the awkwardness look like? What does the awkwardness do to you? All right, we're getting a seconding of the awkward. You typically feel a little bit awkward. I'd be curious about that from your perspective too. What does awkwardness look like? How does it show up? It's a bit weird. I get bashful. Ooh, we've got somebody flipping the script. Good, because it means my partner and I are comfortable with each other and are interested in each other. So it's like an exciting feeling of like, okay, this is a good thing. Yeah. People with penises don't like hearing things they don't do. Somebody is seconding that. So having some people not really doing great at feedback, right? Not the best at accepting it. Let's see. It's comfortable because I'm comfortable in my sexual wants. So understanding yourself and knowing the things you're into makes it easier to have that conversation. Let's see, sitting across from someone without meeting their eyes because I'm nervous. So yeah, we get a lot of that, like kind of like shifty-eyed looking down into our drinks, into our plates, whatever we're doing, because if we make eye contact with someone, they're just going to know too much about us. It can be comfortable, but most of the time it isn't that way. Awkward, so I feel like I have to laugh a lot. Hey, there's nothing wrong with laughter. You are allowed to laugh to diffuse tension in a situation, and that's actually a really good strategy. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So anxious, even though my partner is very supportive. Yeah, so even though there's a supportive context, there might be another bigger, earlier context that says, oh, I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can do this. It's kind of fun and exciting, honestly. Yeah, so you're getting to learn something new about someone. I'd love to hear more about what makes it exciting in particular. I imagine both of us being comfortable and happy. So lots of talk about comfort here and discomfort. It seems dirty sometimes, even as someone who is very open sexually. So it feels like something inappropriate. I'm assuming what you mean by dirty, but feel free to correct me in the chat if I'm misinterpreting you. That's like a typical Tuesday. So you're talking to someone about these things all the time. I love that for you. I almost feel like I have to make jokes while I'm doing it because it's awkward. Yeah. So lots of people talking about using humor to deflect. Uncomfortableness, it can be extremely exciting and eager, but also uncomfortable and sometimes anxiety ridden. This is a both and situation. You get a little bit of everything, and that's okay. If I'm comfortable with someone, it's very easy to talk about, but not with someone I don't know. Ooh, I'd love, feel free to like reflect on this for yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat, but what helps you realize that you are comfortable with someone? How do you just get that internal sense of self? It makes me nervous sometimes, but it's fun when the other person encourages me and is understanding. Yeah, so supportive context, right? I used to feel awkward until I realized it's a necessary conversation. So I just go for it now. It's a necessary conversation because this is how I judge my potential partners. If they aren't mature about it, I won't have sex with them. You got a good, nice line there, right? Like, you can't talk to me about sex, then we can't do the sex. Sorry. It also depends on the person. If I know the person, I'm comfortable. If I don't, it's extremely awkward. So it's somebody else seconding the person thing. It's interesting to hear other people's sexual desires. So being really intrigued by like the listening part of this. Awesome. I love that you all shared all of these things. Thank you so much. And it's a really common theme for people to say that it's uncomfortable. I don't feel like I can make eye contact. I feel like I have to kind of lead with a joke or kind of dance around things because I'm not quite sure how to bring it up. Nobody ever taught me how to talk about these things. So I don't know how to do it. So then I kind of end up just word vomiting or being like, anal. Do you have a butt? I don't know. Do you like it? What's happening? Right? We end up in that kind of awkward place where we just say things, right? Like we don't know how we want to communicate. We're not quite sure how to lead. We don't know how to set the context for that conversation. We're going to unpack all of that today, including for the person who said, how do you discuss anal? We'll talk about that too, probably just at the end. But we start off as young children, as young people, knowing how to communicate our needs and wants, right? From the time we are born, we are really good at being like, that's a hell no for me. I want a snack, please. No, now. I want the snack now. Specifically, I would like a goldfish. Give me. Right? We're really good about that when we are younger. But as we get older, that changes, right? We start to kind of buffer off. We don't talk as much about what we want. We don't talk as much about what we don't like. So tell me, what are some of those changes? What changes from when we are a kid, blissfully unaware, telling people everything that we want and need and don't want, to when we're older? What are some of the things that change that for us? And not even just thinking about sex here, just wants and needs in general. Being taught it's disrespectful. Yeah, so it's inappropriate for older people to ask for what they want or to set a boundary, right? We consider that it's rude. Asking seems greedy. Yeah, this is one I hear a lot, right? That like, oh, I'm asking for too much if I say this thing that I want, right? It's, I should just be happy with what I have, what I'm being given. What society thinks you need. Yeah, so you just have to accept that thing that somebody gave you. And if you question it, then like, whoo, what are you doing over there? It's kind of wild. It seems shameful. When I was younger, I didn't care about other people liking me. Now that I'm older, I'm worried about making sure as many people like me as possible. So yeah, that sense of being liked, right? And to go with it, if we then set a boundary, what does that mean for judgment? What does that mean for how other people might be engaging with us? That wanting more is wrong. I hate asking for more. So yeah, a lot of people who are kind of having this experience of like, I don't feel like I'm allowed to ask for more or different than what I was given, right? I can't give back the mashed potatoes because of what I actually want is a baked potato. I just have to eat the mashed potatoes even though I'm lactose intolerant. I don't want to be selfish. Yeah, so a lot of these things all kind of tying up here. And fundamentally, what all of these things point back to is shame. There's shame about taking up space. There's shame about being really blunt about our desires. There's shame that say, you aren't allowed to like this thing. That thing is weird. Having to go along with the status quo, right? We have so many things that can come into play here. Let's see, adults constantly push us out of our comfort zones as children, which works out sometimes with vegetables, for example, but it translates into other aspects and it can turn into childhood abuse, right? So people not respecting boundaries isn't just one type of problem. It bleeds into many different areas of our lives. Especially cis or folks who were born and identified female at birth are taught that we must accommodate others. Yeah, so that early socialization that people might get if they were assigned female at birth, regardless of if they're cis or if they're a cis woman or not. Shame has a really big role here. It's got an outsized effect on how we are able to engage with these things. And so we're going to watch a quick video And some of the references for it are going to feel a little dated to y'all, but one of the things that I really love about this is that it points to just how bad we are at having this conversation, how bad we are at talking about it.
This is the inside of an engine. It may not be as sexy as some of the car pictures you've seen in your dad's car magazines. That's driving. This is driving right here. All right, there's one thing I want you guys to take away from driver's ed. It's don't drive. If you have to drive, wear a seatbelt, but don't drive.
So how is driver's ed going at school?
It's fine.
Do you have any questions or?
I really don't want to talk about this.
Okay, and don't forget that when you drive with somebody, it's like driving with everyone they've ever driven with. You drive with some guy, you're driving with all the girls he drove with.
I want you to know, buddy, be selective. You only need one car, really.
So you've only ever driven one car?
Kenny, we're talking about you now, not me.
Yes.
Can two boys drive together?
Nope.
I had no idea that that's what it looked like on the inside. Should we be looking at this? Oof. It's gross.
If you get yourself into a wreck, you're gonna have a busted fender for the rest of your life. No one's gonna wanna drive with you.
You know, God wants you to wait to drive.
I don't know how that can be true.
Jesus never drove, so I don't know why you need to.
What do you do if your carburetor breaks down?
You don't need to know that.
I don't want to wait to drive because I don't want to get to college and find out I'm a bad driver.
You know, I wish my dad had talked to me about this, but he didn't. I had to learn this in the streets on my own. Talk about a misspent youth.
Can you ever just drive for fun? Because I hear it's really fun.
No, driving is only to get you where you need to go.
There are plenty of good alternatives to driving, like walking, biking's fun. What about rollerblading?
Now, I wanted Mrs. Stevens to come in here today and talk to the girls, but she wasn't available. So I'm gonna have to do it.
Hey, Kenny. Hey,
yeah,
buddy.
1 minute.
Allison, what is this?
They gave it to us in driver's ed.
This is just encouraging you to drive.
Everybody take one pamphlet, take them home, read them.
Everything okay, buddy?
Yeah,
Hey, I didn't say anything.
why is the gym teacher teaching us how to drive?
I don't know. I bet he hasn't driven in years. I want to drive. Fast, but sometimes slow to enjoy the view.
A train is going past my house right now, everybody, so welcome. You can probably hear the train here. One of the reasons why I really love this video is that it points to the many, many ways that we subtly say, oh, nope, you can't talk about that. Oh, you have a question? Bad question, dumb question, inappropriate question. And all of those things build up over time. So when it comes to talking about sex, we tend to feel like, am I even allowed to talk about this? Every time I've tried to, someone has made it seem like sex is embarrassing or wrong or dirty. Did anybody catch the poster right in the beginning of that video that said real women wait to drive, right? So we get a lot of messages about who is allowed to talk about sex. And yeah, thank God it's not a train, right? So we had, or not a car, rather. I'm reading all of the things backwards today. We get so many of these mixed up messages. So it makes a lot of sense that sitting here today, so many of you are like, this feels pretty awkward. I'm in my room right now by myself, still feel pretty awkward watching this conversation. So we are going to talk through all of those things more. To the question of if subtitles are available, I'm not able to do live captioning with this software. You should be able to control, like turn the volume up a little bit more on your end, but on your recording that you're going to get tomorrow, subtitles will be on there. So I'm just not able to do them like within this platform, unfortunately, which really sucks. I asked them about it. They keep telling me they're going to add it one day, but they will be there in your recording tomorrow. So next up, we are talking roadblocks, because if we've talked about this whole context of how we get to this shamey, awkward, how do I talk about it? Am I even allowed to talk about it place? We have to talk about the actual ways that shows up. So there are a lot of reasons why sexual communication is hard. It could be because we don't feel comfortable talking about our genitals. It could be the belief that asking for pleasure is bad or inconsiderate. So all of you who mentioned the guilt thing or feeling like you're not allowed to ask for more or ask for something different, it's right there. It's the second dot, the second darkest green. Yeah. It could be because you've experienced abuse in the past and now it's really hard to advocate for yourself and advocate for your boundaries and the things that you want because you don't know how someone is going to react. It could be because you're afraid of other people judging you. And it could be because self-judgment takes up a lot of room in your life, especially for those of you who know you have some perfectionistic tendencies. That might be an extra strong one. It also has to do with this idea of, if we're meant to be together, my partner should just know what I want. The idea of being sexually psychic, which just flat out is a myth. I'm sorry. I wish it were true that somebody could be sexually psychic if things were just meant to be, but it's not how things work. It's not fair to put that on your partner. It could be because we just don't have the language, right? We're not quite sure how to define or explain our desires because we've never heard them talked about before. So how do we talk about that thing that we want? How do we talk about the fact that it feels pretty normal to us, but some other people say it's weird and we're not sure what to think? And it could be because there's no space to talk about sexuality outside of the bedroom. So if we're only saying the only time you're allowed to talk about sex is while sex is happening, we're going to have a lot of confused moments. We're going to have a lot of discomfort. We're going to have a really high level of vulnerability, a really high level of people feeling like, I don't know how to do this right now. So I'm just going to not because it feels like too much. The reality is that talking about your boundaries, your desires, your curiosities, the things that you're into, the things you want to try, the things you read about online and have no idea what they mean, but you want to do a Google with a partner, talking about those things shouldn't be any different than talking about our dinner plans or our study schedule for the week, or if we want to go to that party. All of those things are regular parts of our lives that involve setting boundaries, talking about needs, talking about desires. We don't, for the most part, problematize talking about those things. Some of us do, especially those of us who really struggle with advocating for what we want. But talking about sex shouldn't be, any less mundane than that. Because if sex is a part of our life or we want it to be a part of our life, then it's allowed to have that level of normalcy, right? And so here are some of the biggest myths that I hear from my students all across the age span from 16 to 50. The belief that talking about sex ruins the mood. So if you talk about what you want or you talk about what you don't want, then nope, sex can't happen now because sex is supposed to happen silently, like a movie where everybody just knows everything. Again, that idea of being sexually psychic. If you're meant to be together, your partner is just going to know what you like because they are going to have been like divinely connected to your body, and they're going to know every single way that you want to be touched and all of your fantasies before you even have to talk about that. And then the idea that sex should only be discussed in bed, which is just flat out wrong, right? We don't only talk about dinner at the dinner table. We shouldn't only talk about sex in the bedroom. The reality is that talking about desires and boundaries can actually set and increase the mood. So I know y'all are having this whole conversation in the chat right now, right? But actually talking about these things can make you excited to do them, can help you feel more secure doing them, especially when you practice it. And the reality also is that no one is sexually psychic. I hate to break it to you, but if you feel like you can just say, please move half an inch to the left, like 18 times in your head, and eventually it's going to get through to your partner. It only works if you actually find an external way to communicate with them, right? We have to have that moment because we are setting unrealistic expectations for our partners if we just expect them to know everything. Probably they're feeling really nervous about it too. And it's best to talk about sex outside of the bedroom first and outside of the bedroom often. So you don't have to talk about sex everywhere, but you absolutely can talk about sex over dinner with a partner, with friends. For those of you who have sex positive families, you might talk about sex over the dinner table because sex comes up in the media a lot, right? Sex comes up in the conversations we have, in the TV shows we watch. And it's best to talk about sex outside of the bedroom first because it decreases the pressure and it gives people the opportunity to say, I don't know, I need to think about that a little bit. Or I'm not sure. Can you tell me a little bit more about it so I can actually let you know how I feel? Thank you for sharing that with me. When we wait to have those conversations till we are in bed, till sex is like in the moment of happening, the thing that we do is put a ton of pressure on the other person to respond and agree to whatever we are asking for. So if we are saying, hey, I would really love to tie you up. I want to practice bondage right now. And we say that when things are already hot and heavy, people are partially undressed. Your partner might then feel like, okay, sure. We're not intentionally putting pressure on somebody, but because people are undressed and feeling vulnerable, and because we know that a lot of people struggle with just accepting what is given to them or saying yes to what is asked of them, we know then that it's going to make it harder to say, not sure how I feel about that yet. Or, ooh, can we talk about that more? Beyond the fact that consent has to be something that's fully informed. So have that conversation outside of the bedroom first. Set up an opportunity to really talk about the things that you're into and the things that you're not and the things you're curious about, and review that conversation often. But we're going to talk about that all in the next section. So I want y'all to tell me in the chat, if somebody says, I want you to fuck me, what does it mean? What are they saying? Let's have sex. Okay. What kind of sex? What are they asking for specifically? Sex with no strings attached, right? So, okay, then maybe there is a less rigid relationship here. Depends on where and how they say it. Penetration, question mark. I should probably head over, but it really depends on who they are. That is some good consent right there. Depends on the context. They want you to rail them. I need you to rail me. I appreciate that both of you at the exact same moment had this thought. It means sex time where they do not top. Okay, so then we're thinking about a specific context, right? They're bottoming, they're receiving. There might be a little bit more domination involved. They want it rough. Well, you can fuck your partner. How? What specifically are they asking for? I think about it passionately. I want to please you. Depends on the time of night. More passion. They're asking me to fuck them. I need more info. Yes, you need more information. More primal, very rough. So when I ask students this question, one of the first things they say, and the most frequent thing that they say is, feels like they probably want something more dominant. It feels like they want something a little bit more rough, like it's really urgent. But it doesn't actually tell you a lot about the how, right? Like, what parts of your body do you want to engage in? What types of toys do you want to use? What context? What words are we going to use together? Where and when, right? I want you to fuck me doesn't mean right now. Could mean next week. Could mean next year. We don't know. It could be having internet sex, right? Like sexting. It could be, engaging in some type of power exchange play. It could mean that somebody is like, I would like to be topped right now. Please pillow princess me. There are so many different things that this could mean, but the reality is that you'll never actually know what anybody means unless you are specific. Now, to have a nerd moment, when I was an undergrad, I studied literature and I did translation work between Spanish and French and English. And in translation work, you consider how to best communicate not only the specific thing that you were saying, but your meaning, so the core of what you want to get across, and the intention, right? So we can't just translate something word for word and be like, yes, perfect. That's exactly what that means. Because in the person who is reading it, hearing it, whatever, we might then say, that word means something totally different than what you think it means. And when I think of it, I mean this thing, but I think you mean this other thing. And I don't really know what you mean. I'm kind of afraid to ask. Okay. Right? So we have to actually think about how can we create a shared language together. And yes, for the person asking what pillow princess means, pillow princess is a phrase within the queer community that typically refers to somebody who receives without doing a lot of work back towards their partner. So pillow princess literally being laying upon pillows and receiving sexual pleasure. Typically, it refers to somebody who that's always or often or most often their sexual context, but it could be contextual as well, right? Someone is pillow princessing just for the day. Our context and our own personal histories are going to affect how we translate what we hear or what we read. When we aren't specific, when we say things like, I want you to fuck me, and we don't give any context, we don't give that extra little bit of specificity, then we're not actually asking our partners for the most pleasurable experience. We are assuming that they're going to get what we mean. And those assumptions don't often work out, right? Because a lot of you have said, well, it feels like something that would be a little bit more kinky, right? But what if for someone, when they say, I want you to fuck me, they mean, I want this soft and delicate, but I want it to be intense and I want it to be a really long experience. But I don't want you to be choking me. I don't want you to be pulling my hair. Like, I still want it to be sensual and soft. There are so many different ways to interpret it, and it is always going to depend on our own personal context. Not only our past sexual histories, but the things that we've been taught are normal, the types of ideas about sex that we've been exposed to, our friends and how they talk about sex, the regions where we grew up, our religious experiences, if we've had them, all of those things are going to inform how we understand the sentence, I want you to fuck me, or I want this thing, or I want that thing, right? Take anal play, for example. If somebody says, hey, I'm interested in anal play, that can mean a lot of different things. It could mean analingus, which is oral sex performed on an anus. It could mean anal fingering. It could mean using a toy. It could mean some other type of penetrative play. It could mean massage. It could mean giving or receiving. There are so many different ways to interpret it, and we'll never know if we don't give more specifics and ask for clarification by saying, how do you want me to fuck you? What are you asking for specifically right now? I want to make sure I'm meeting your needs. And there's so many different ways to do that. And that's what we're going to be focusing on for the whole rest of the time today. There is no shame in being a pillow princess. Not at all. You are allowed to be a pillow princess. There is nothing wrong with that. Just because some people use it in a shamey way doesn't mean it's actually something to be ashamed of. Let's see. Okay. I'm looking at your anonymous questions and there's a pop-up on them. I like that y'all are giving support over in the chat. So there are 4 main strategies we are going to talk about for the rest of the time today. We are also going to talk about a bonus strategy, which is using tools. So we're thinking about using tools, taking your conversation out of the bedroom, watching your eyebrows, which we'll get to that in a minute, knowing your medium, and being aware of how you argue, which might seem counterintuitive to having an open and honest and positive conversation about sex and sexuality. But the reality is that when you bring the big emotions, the challenging emotions into things, sometimes it can get into the arguing place, even if that isn't necessarily what we want. So first things first, take it out of the bedroom. I know somebody said earlier, can you imagine talking about sex over the dinner table? And I want you to imagine talking about sex over the dinner table, at a restaurant, in the dining hall, at a picnic table, while you're eating takeout in your bed with your partner, right? Actually have a conversation about your desires, your interests, the random things that are floating around in your head when it comes to sex. Those moments where you feel self-conscious and aren't quite sure how to communicate it. And that's because when we talk about sexual issues, usually they are not just bedroom problems. Usually we are also facing those things outside of the bedroom. So if you are having a hard time saying, hey, this is the thing that I want. I'd really love to do this thing. I want to try this thing. If you're having a hard time saying that in bed, you're probably also having a hard time saying which restaurant you want to go to for dinner, or saying, no, I don't want to see that movie. I'd rather watch this thing instead, or I'd rather go to this party instead. Similarly, if you are somebody who has a hard time accepting feedback in the bedroom, right? I feel like you're not really paying attention to my body. You're kind of just doing what you feel like you're supposed to be doing instead of hearing me when I ask for this thing. The reality is that you are probably also bringing that same energy to your non-sexual context too, right? So you are also probably somebody who maybe talks over other people, or maybe tries to convince everybody else to do the thing that you want to do the most. And there's no shame in that, right? We all have our weird communication tics, but we need to be aware of them so that we can work to not do them, because we never want to be putting pressure on other people. So pay attention to the bedroom problems you have, because they're probably not just problems in the bedroom. And when we focus on how to help support them, help change them, when we actually give them a little bit of attention outside of the bedroom, we're going to start to see changes inside the bedroom too. But the second reason is because we need to defuck the context. So you're partially undressed, you're with somebody, they say, hey, I want to do this thing. We've already talked about how that can make it really hard to say no, or to say, hey, I want to think about it, or I don't know what that means, or I'm not feeling it today, because we're already undressed and people might feel extra pressure to go along with whatever their partner asks. So we never want to then be bringing up something brand new for the very first time in the bedroom. We always want to talk about it first outside of the bedroom. And I know y'all are in college, you might be like, I literally only have a bedroom right now. I have a room with a bed, I have a hallway. There's not a lot else. I totally get that. In that case, all I mean, don't have this conversation for the first time when people are partially undressed or you're making out, things are already happening, right? You can sit upright, put clothes on, have that conversation while you are out for a nice walk. Going for a walk is a fantastic strategy for talking about sex, because it gives you something to do and somewhere to go. And also then you don't have to make eye contact, for those of you who are the nervous eye contact people. I love that this is going to be, I think, a meme now. Sitting on a picnic blanket. People are there. Are they having a sex talk date, or are they doing homework? We'll never know. And the next thing is to neutralize the atmosphere, right? So again, when we bring something up for the first time, and we bring it up when sex is already happening or when it is about to happen, that's a really high stakes environment for a lot of people. They might feel really, really vulnerable. So instead, we want to neutralize it. So all of these folks who are talking about places all around campus that I don't know, because I've never been to your campus before, the Dell, the Dairy Loop. The Dairy Loop? I have questions. I will Google later. Right? Like going to a hammock, going to a grassy area, taking a walk around campus, even just going to a common space, can make it a neutral atmosphere where everyone feels like they're on equal ground, right? You're not in any one person's room. So it's not like, you know, I'm coming into their space. I have to kind of go along with their house rules. Go somewhere that feels equal for everybody. For those of you in long distance relationships, that might mean that you each are in your own cozy little spot. You might be in your room. You might be FaceTiming and having that conversation, right? All of those things are options, but you want to create a neutral atmosphere to talk about sex, to talk about the things that you're interested in, to have those bigger conversations beyond just the quick moments that we have in the bedroom, because those are also relevant. To the person who said, what about over text? I don't super recommend having big conversations about sex exclusively over text message, but we're actually going to talk about that in a couple of slides. So hang tight, hold on to it. We used to have a dairy barn before it got shut down. Now it's called the Dairy Loop. I see. Okay. I love it. Thank you so much for the context. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I was like, are there a lot of cows on campus? What's happening here? I don't know. Thank you. So ultimately, let's take these big conversations out of the bedroom. Now, again, we'll talk about the medium for that in a bit, because not everybody is going to use the same thing. Not all of us are going to be verbal communicators, but hold on, we will get back to that in just a minute. Because having these conversations shouldn't just be happening right before sex happens, either for the first time or for the 100th time. When we build them up and we actually intentionally bring space in to say, hey, let's check in about our sex life. Let's talk about this thing, or I saw this post on Instagram, or I saw this TikTok talking about this thing. It made me really curious. It doesn't mean that you have to be saying, I know for a fact I'm really into this thing. I want to try it today. It could just be like, I want to neutralize talking about sex. I just want to make it a little more normal in my life. And when we give sex talk more space, those conversations become less fraught. The anxiety that we talked about earlier, the feeling like we're not allowed to talk about what we want, that reduces every single time we open up that conversation and somebody is there to say, like, thanks for being here with me. Thanks for talking about this. This is super weird. I've never talked about this before. So give them a little bit more space, and all of those things will start to reduce. The pressure will alleviate. The next thing is to use tools. So if you weren't taught how to talk about sex, you are not going to be an expert at it. It does not work that way. You're not going to go from never having talked about sex to being like, yes, here are all of the intimate details about everything I like. And no, I really don't like it when you bump up against my cervix like that. Because you might not even have that language, right? But you don't have to just jump right in and be totally comfortable. There are so many tools that you can actually use to help facilitate this conversation. And we are going to get to what apps in a second. I love your enthusiasm. I promise I'm not going to leave you hanging. So we can use worksheets or journals. So I'm actually going to put a worksheet in your resource folder. Now, for those of you who haven't done an event with me in the past, welcome. Hi, love that you're here. I am going to update your event website, which is the thing that you went to get to this today. And it's going to have your recording for today. It's going to have your slides so you can go over them again. And it's going to have like yay many bullet points with PDFs, links to other websites, blog posts I recommend, videos I recommend. So there are going to be a lot of things going here, including a worksheet. You can also journal about the things that you're interested in, right? So for those of you who maybe aren't like the fastest processors, you don't communicate verbally very well, but you know that you are good at writing, you know that when you can kind of word vomit it on paper, you can more clearly communicate separately. Journaling can be a really helpful tool for you. There are so many apps, both for your phone and that you can use in your browser to help you do this. We'll talk about what a couple of my favorites are in just a second. And you can also use games. So there are a lot of different games to help you have this conversation, right? That you can kind of have on hand to be like, ooh, don't know how I want to start this, but okay, let's pick a card. And this one says, how do you like to be touched? Let's start there. Let's start there to see how it goes, right? Yes. So to the person who said, will we get an email with a link to all of the resources? The website that you went to today to like get here is that same website that you're going to go to always for all of these resources. So it should already be in your email or on like the Sports Med Instagram. And I'll also link to it at the end of the workshop. So one of the apps that I really love that is specifically designed for talking about sex with a partner is an app called Spicer, and they have a web app called We Should Try It. So if you have, a smartphone, you can download the Spicer app. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can go to your browser. You can go to weshouldtryit.com. Now, these surveys are meant to be done like between two partners, and sometimes they make assumptions about the body parts people might have based on, the selections that you choose. The really cool thing is that when you use these tools, you will basically get a survey. So when you do the We Should Try It website, you get 70 questions, we'll say, and you go through and say like, yeah, super into that. Maybe open to talking about it. That's a fuck no for me. And you can actually go through and actually select all of those things. Then you put in your partner's email and say like, hey, I want you to do this little survey. Then We Should Try It. We'll send them an email and they'll do the survey totally separately on their own. You'll find out only about the things you matched positively on. So all the things that you were like, both, yes, we're into this, or one of you was like, yes, into it, and the other one was like, I don't know, curious, we'll see what happens. You'll only find out about those positive matches. Ditto with the Spicer app. The Spicer app just makes it a little bit easier to do like small chunks at a time. So We Should Try It is really designed to go through and do the whole survey at once. We Should Try It does just little cards. You can thumbs up, thumbs down. And the one that's like this, the thumbs up and thumbs down simultaneously is like, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. So Spicer and We Should Try It are two fantastic tools. There are some others, but they're a little less user-friendly, a little less reliable, and some of them make you pay. We Should Try It and Spicer don't, so I recommend them because they're free and they're easy to use. And then this game, which is the sex talk game, again, it's got a lot of different questions that you can ask. And for those of you who have maybe been with your partners for longer, whether or not you've had sex before or you haven't had sex before, these can be great tools to just actually jumpstart your conversation, right? So when you're doing something like the Spicer app, for example, you might be like, I don't know what this question is asking me. I do not know what that word means. Did you know what it meant? I had to Google it. I had to Google this thing. Or did you see that I asked us about that? I had no idea that that was even a thing people could do. So you can talk about the things you don't know, right? It doesn't have to just be about like, oh, hey, we're both into this, which is fun and exciting. It can also be about the, did you know that was a thing? Because I didn't know that was a thing. And I had to Google, and I was very surprised by what I found when I Googled what it meant. And you can have those conversations and bring surprise into it as well. But all of these tools will be linked on your resource website later. Now, the next thing is to learn your communication type. Now, tell me in the chat, how many of you prefer communicating in some type of written way? So you like to journal, you're really great at email, text messaging is your jam. And tell me how many of you are like, no, verbal. I'm great on my feet. I'm just like boom, 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 replying. I know exactly what I want. Love to text. Face-to-face. I like texting or writing a letter. Non-verbal fan, text form, please. I love texting. I will say, I think this is a generational thing too. I think more and more people, because not to be all when I was a youth, but when I was a youth, when like text messages first became really popular, you had to pay for every single text message you sent, and you had to pay for every single text message you received. So a lot of us were really bad at it. And now you can just do whatever you want on the internet because you have every single type of messaging platform possible. So I think now it's so much more common for people to love texting, right? We get really used to that instantaneous type of communication because we've practiced it a lot more and from an earlier age. I'm good at written communication, but I prefer face-to-face because I better understand the context and their feelings. Yeah, so you're getting kind of those micro reactions, right? The eyebrow situation we'll talk about in a minute. Ooh, I've started a fight now. I said that generationally you all prefer texting, and now everyone's talking about face-to-face. I love it. Poke back against me. I don't care. It's fine. I'm not going to generationally define you. The important thing is basically to know what your type is, right? So for those of you who say like, I'm good at this thing, I know it's fine, but I prefer this other one, know what you prefer. Know what works for you. Let's see. Texting is the most efficient, but I like face-to-face because I need to get vibes from my potential partner. And if he tells me he's into bondage in the middle of a Starbucks, then it's an instant turn on just based on the confidence he had to say that in public, because so many don't. I also love your energy. Thank you for this, right? Like there is a context for how things might really work for us. And for other people, they might be like, that's a hard no for me. We don't talk about bondage. In Starbucks, we only talk about bondage at this other coffee place that clearly is much more kink friendly. But everybody's context is different, right? You might know that your Starbucks baristas are all pretty kinky. There's like leather collars happening all over the place. But know your type. Know how you communicate your feelings best, and know how you interpret information best, right? We can think about actual language barriers here. Like it might be easier for somebody to read and write in a different language than to speak and auditorily process in a different language. But we can also just think about how our brains actually process information, right? If we are in a place of feeling really, really anxious about something, and we're like really focused on like, how sweaty am I? Can this person tell that I'm kind of shaking right now? I can't make eye contact. I can't make eye contact. I can't make eye contact. We might not be actually focusing on what that person is verbally saying to us, right? So we might need to mash up our styles. So pay attention to how you prefer to be communicated to in delicate contexts. So if somebody had something big to tell you, something important, something where they really needed your attention, they needed you to understand what was happening, what's going to be the best way for them to communicate it, and how? Because sex can be a delicate thing to talk about, especially when we're starting out, and especially for bringing up new desires for the first time. And it doesn't have to all be just spoken. It doesn't have to be something that we're just saying aloud. You can use text messages. You can write letters. You can write in a journal and pass the journal over to your partner. You can write emails. You can record voice notes and send them to your partner. You can have conversations over FaceTime, and that might feel different, or on like a regular old phone that you can't see someone's face. It doesn't have to all be about the face-to-face conversations or like the in-bed conversations. That's just what a lot of us are taught. And you can actually blend dynamics together, right? So a lot of times we get people who are delayed processors. So people who say like, someone will tell me something, it takes me a while to kind of sit with my feelings, figure out how I feel, how I want to respond. And a lot of times those people end up paired up with or friends with people who are like, I'm an instant communicator. I know exactly how I feel. I can reply very quickly. I need us all to be on the same page. But you can create a blended experience, right? So the person who is more of a delayed processor can be with somebody in any type of relationship or partnership, and they can be with someone who's more of an instantaneous communicator, as long as you are each using communication types that works best for you. So that might mean that the delayed processor writes out their feelings. So you might write it out in a notebook and pass it over to your partner. I'm interested in these things. This is what I want to tell you. I want to make sure I get it as clear as possible. You might pass it over, and then the person might read it, take a second, verbally reply, give you time to think through any clarifying questions you have, and then pass your notebook back so you can write back, right? You can actually make that a blended experience, because when we're practicing intense or delicate communication for the first time, we can build in as many fail safes as possible, right? If you know you're a delayed processor, then writing something out can give you time to really think about how you feel about it, and to also just outright ask the question, what I'm hearing you say is this thing, or when you say this, what I'm interpreting is this thing. Is that what you're meaning to communicate to me? You can blend your communication types together. You don't have to rely on just one. And in fact, relying on just one in many contexts can elevate the pressure. If you've ever gotten in an argument with someone because you're like, that is not what I'm trying to say, I don't feel like you're understanding me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So don't force yourself into a particular communication style. Spend some time learning what works best for you. So for the person who was like, what about text messages? Part of the reason why I don't recommend text messages is because a lot of times people will be like, it's 2 a.m., I have thoughts on my mind, here's my small novel I'm going to send to you without you knowing. That is not a great way to talk about sex. You always want to like actually set the context. You want people to know about it in advance. Now, where texting can really work is when you are talking with a partner and saying, hey, I want to talk about something that I feel really nervous about. I want to talk about it via text. Are you like in a place where you're actually going to be able to read and reply right now? So set that context, right? Because if you send a text where you are sharing a lot of your feelings and your vulnerabilities, and that person is in class, or that person is asleep, or their phone died, or they're in that one building on campus that has no cell signal at all, and you're sitting there waiting and interpreting that as a rejection, that leads to more conflict, right? So when we're talking about texting, we need to actually make sure everybody is on board to communicate at the same time. Everyone is there saying, yes, I can be here for this conversation. Because if we were having a face-to-face conversation and we knew, hey, this person's running to class, we probably wouldn't be like, I know you have a minute before class starts. Literally, you're walking in the door right now. I want to talk about this thing. Here's all my feelings, bye. And then expect a response, right? Like we wouldn't expect that face-to-face. So we do need to kind of replicate some of those contexts. We need to give everybody as much of an opportunity to interpret what we're saying and actually figure out how they want to reply, what their response is. So texting can be great when you actually talk about it in advance. That might mean that you set up like some time specifically to have a conversation via text message. So no, actually, I'm in the middle of something right now. I'm finishing up this paper and I'm feeling really stressed. Could we plan to talk about it tomorrow around like 2? Can you text me when you're ready and I'll let you know when I'm good? And that would be a great way to facilitate that if you want that whole conversation to go back and forth via text. The next thing is to know what your signature battle moves. Now, you might be like, but we're not supposed to be fighting. I don't understand. Now, the reality is like, yeah, it would be great if conflict didn't happen when we were talking about sex, but it probably will. Because people are people, right? And when people feel vulnerable, sometimes arguments escalate. So you actually need to know how you fight. What are your signature battle moves? So for me, I know that in an argument, I tend to center myself, right? I say, I understand you feel that way. Here's what I'm interpreting right now. Here's what is happening for me. I don't understand why you aren't seeing that, right? Like I know that point of reflection is something that I tend to do. So when the 5-year-old in my brain is like, pay attention to me, this is what I'm saying, I know that I need to take a minute. I need some space. I'm gonna say like, hey, can we take 5 from this and come back in a second? Do not want to escalate this further. Or I'm gonna take a sip of water and take a breath before things continue. So you need to know how you fight dirty. So for me, right, it's kind of centering myself and bringing whatever is happening back to me and how it's affecting me. Why do you fight dirty? So what's the reason for it? I often feel like people are misunderstanding me and I really struggle with that. And I never want to be misinterpreted. And so then I get really intensely focused on making sure people are understanding me. So it's coming from me feeling self-conscious. What do I need? What I need is a break and for someone to say, I hear you, but I need you to hear me right now. And then resolution, right? So how do we actually resolve when we escalate into a conflict? That might mean that we take a break, right? Let's go for a walk together. Just like get all this energy out. Just go outside, get some fresh air. It might mean, hey, let's take an hour apart, come back when we're a little refreshed. It might mean going to go do some exercise before we say, okay, how are we feeling? It might mean that we just say, oh, this was a big misunderstanding. I'm really sorry. I was thinking about this as a totally different thing. Now that you said this is not a problem. We all are going to have signature battle moves, and there's no shame in that. You are a person, and people engage in conflict. And not engaging in conflict is a form of engaging in conflict. If you are someone who is like, nope, I am conflict averse, I am not doing it, that can also be a way of fighting dirty, right? If someone is clearly feeling like, I'm feeling really frustrated, I'm feeling like you're not hearing me, and you're like, I don't want to have this conversation right now. I don't see that. I don't think there's a problem. I don't think I'm doing that. That's also a conflict style. We also need to talk about that. So knowing these things can be really uncomfortable, right? A lot of us aren't super comfortable looking at how we engage with conflict, but it's really important because when we know how we engage with conflict, we can actually anticipate it. We can recognize the internal signs in ourselves. So I know that when I get to a place of feeling really self-conscious and worrying that I might be misunderstood, I stop making eye contact. I get like really sweaty. My skin feels really hot, like here. And so when I recognize those physical feelings in myself, it's like, okay, you need to like shake it out. Like you need to do something. You need to find a way to process through this feeling without reflecting it back into this way that you fight dirty, because that's not a normal way to engage in conflict. It's not a healthy way to engage in conflict. Because conflict isn't inherently bad. It's totally normal, totally human. What we need to do is figure out how can we use conflict to come to mutual understandings, or to say, we're not going to come to a mutual understanding on this, but I get where you're coming from. It's just that I don't agree, right? How do we come to that place in a healthy way? And when it comes to talking about sex, we need to know how to do that, right? Because somebody might be interested in something that we are really not interested in. And that could lead to a conflict depending on how we engage with it. Which brings me to one of the most important points of the evening, which is mind over eyebrows. So I know one of you said your gynecologist has a wild eyebrow situation. They like cannot manage the things that are happening here. Now, mind your eyebrows is fundamentally about showing judgment, because some of us have very expressive eyebrows. Some of us have very expressive like nose, mouth areas, or shoulders, or arms. We have a lot of different ways that we show judgment. Pay attention to the things that are happening on your face right now. As we talk about judgment, you might be doing some of them. You might be like, yep, I do have a way that I do that. It's pursing my lips and going like this. Yeah. You have to know how you physically show judgment, because when it comes to conversations about sex, judgment is one of the things that people fear the most. Now, we might feel judgment, right? Or we might feel surprise. And those things are totally okay. There's nothing wrong with feeling those feelings or experiencing those things. We do want to manage how we communicate them. We do want to manage how we filter out those responses, because your eyebrows might be saying things that your mouth does not want to. Our eyebrows might be showing those gut reactions that we're having, even when we want to be engaging in the conversation in a different way. And it's really scary, right? It's scary to think about being judged. And so when we understand that most of us are afraid of being judged for the things that we like or for the boundaries that we set, we also can understand that it's going to be also pretty scary for our partners probably to be on the receiving end of that judgment. So know how you show it, right? If you are an eyebrow person, manage these things. Relax the brow muscles. Focus on them, right? And if you know that you can't, go for a walk, right? Have those conversations where you don't have to be making eye contact, or really focus on having a cup of tea or eating a snack or making a meal, something where you can kind of have facial expressions and they're not like, here are my judgment eyebrows. I'm looking at you with intention and judgment. And your eyes are like screaming inside, right? You also want to think about how you have been judged, because the things that you have been judged for in the past and the ways that people have shown judgment to you can let you know what some of those points of activation might be. So if you know that with a past partner, you brought up thing A, right? We keep using anal as the example for tonight, so we'll keep doing that. We know that you brought up anal and your partner was like, that's disgusting. I never want to hear you talk about that again. and they did like this thing, then you know that that past experience of judgment is probably going to affect how you go into current conversations, right? So thinking about how we've been judged in the past, both in sexual contexts and in non-sexual contexts, and in the areas that we might not actually identify as sexual contexts. So if you were raised in a really strict environment and thinking about sex was something that was considered really wrong, or like, dressing in any type of like moderately revealing way was considered slutty or inappropriate, or you would be yelled at or told that you were out of control, right? Those are all points of judgment that can also affect our sex life, even if they don't feel directly connected to sex. So let's think about that whole ecosystem. Then we have to think about what our reaction is actually telling us, right? So micro reactions aren't just about judgment. They're also about surprise. They're also about excitement. They're also about fear. We all have subtle cues, and a lot of you pointed to this, right? Of saying like, I want to have these conversations face to face because with body language, I can get a little bit more of a sense of how my partner is feeling. Now, when we actually think about the fact that sometimes those gut body reactions don't actually communicate what somebody intends to communicate, right? If someone is feeling surprise, and surprise looks like, oh, we might interpret that, oh, as, ooh, depending on our past context, right? So we have to pay attention to those things. If we know that we're having a micro response, eyebrows, lips, shoulders, whatever it might be, we have to ask what it's actually trying to tell us. What is the actual emotion we're feeling that is being communicated on our face or with our body? And then how do we actually want to respond, right? And that might mean addressing the eyebrows in the room, right? And saying like, you probably saw me have this, this like reaction on my face right now. I want you to know that I'm not judging you for what you just told me. I'm just surprised because I didn't know that our conversation was going to go this way, but I really appreciate you being open with me. But I might be blushing because I'm not used to talking about these things. And this all feels pretty new for me, right? So you actually are just acknowledging what that response is. And you're choosing instead to verbally respond in a way that acknowledges the micro reaction and that says, here's how I really feel. Or that might be, my gut response was like kind of judgy, but I'm really uncomfortable with that. I don't know what it means. So can we talk about what this means for you a little bit more? Because I clearly have like some type of gut reaction, but I don't know if it's actually how I feel. So choosing our response is going to be key here. Now, there are a lot of questions that people submitted that are kind of in yonder region. So we are going to get to those in a second. I promise I'm not overlooking them for those of you who sent in your anonymous questions. So when we think about communication, it's not just about the words of it all. It's also about our body. It's about how we communicate what we want and what we don't want. And we also have to remember that those micro reactions could override what we're saying. And yeah, it's great to manage our eyebrows, but if we can't manage our eyebrows or we don't realize that we're doing that, like that thing that our partner interprets as us being angry, it means we have to name it, right? Say, oop, felt that my eyebrows just raised up a little bit. That's just me feeling surprised, right? Or I can feel that I'm kind of closing off a little. I think it's because I'm really uncomfortable talking about sex in this way. So I'm going to get a blanket and just wrap it around me, cocoon myself in so that I feel a little bit more comfortable. I'd love to hear from y'all. What are some of the ways that you show judgment? What are your micro reactions? I have a slight eyebrow raise. It's always this one. I have no control over it. And I purse my lips. That's what judgment looks like on my face when it happens. But what does it look like in your body? What does judgment feel like for you? Cringing. Yeah, so lots of like, can We can cringe with our lips. We can actually cringe by locking down our jaw, right? And that's going to be visible outside. What are some of the other ways? Or do people feel uncomfortable talking about the way that you judge other people, knowing that you might be like, I've done this to someone in this room right now. I don't know. Squinting and eyebrow furrowing. So like really being like, what are you saying? What is happening here? The side eye. So we have a turning away and also looking and being like, I'm not going to look right at it, but I can't not look at it. Not really micro, but laughing. Yeah. So it's not like a small, subtle thing that we do, but it might be an involuntary response that we have. So it still falls in the category. I've always been told I have very expressive facial expressions. Have people been specific with you with what they mean by expressive? And if not, it might be worth just like taking some selfies and thinking about situations where you've judged people. That way you kind of know what it looks like. Or the up and down eye look, like the shore Jan thing. Yeah. Accidentally stumbled upon Italian flag dildos. There are a lot of multicolor dildos. I don't know that I've ever seen an Italian flag dildo, but there are a lot of pride flag dildos that you can get in different colors. I'd love to know what your reaction was when you stumbled upon those. How do y'all typically engage with judgment? When you notice that you're judging something, what do you do? Especially in like one-on-one communication. You were screaming when you found the dildos. Shock, disappointment. So judgment always feels like a negative, right? Like, oh, you didn't do that thing the way I thought you would. I noticed it and then resented myself for judging. Judgment is normal. You know, it's when we notice it, when we are able to notice it, we're able to say, I had this gut reaction. It's different than how I feel or how I want to feel. And I'm working on changing that. And even if we just have that moment internally, right, that moves us towards change and towards being more open. But shaming ourselves for feeling judgment is never going to help us actually stop judging. So I'd encourage you to say, it's not worth resenting myself. But if you feel like you need to make amends, then find a way to do that. I stop and mentally reassess. Yeah, so I'm feeling that. Okay, what's happening? What's actually going on here? I have very expressive features. Everything I'm thinking will end up on my face. So I make it a point to tell the judgee exactly what I'm feeling and how I'm processing information, because usually people are very vague. So I have to take things at face value. So I always ask for clarification. Yeah. And so this is something that a lot of people will say, like, you know, I need to really understand what you're saying. When we go back to the idea of someone saying, I want you to fuck me, right? That's vague. We need to understand more specifically what's happening here. We can ask for clarification. Otherwise, our eyebrows might show, I'm having this specific reaction because I feel like you're asking me for bondage, and I don't know if you're asking me for bondage, and I just don't, we've never talked about it before. So is that what you want, or what's going on here? We have so many different ways that we experience judgment, that we show judgment. And fundamentally, there isn't anything wrong with it, right? We can experience judgment in a negative way where we try to push people away and say, that person is weird. That person is wrong. That person is doing something inappropriate. And we can also experience judgment of like, that is so cool. I cannot believe that I just openly talked about sex like that. I've never experienced that. And those things might look the same on your face. They might look the same in your body. They might feel the same. Judgment is something that we do a zillion times a day. We are always judging and assessing situations. So there's nothing inherently wrong with it. But we do have to recognize the root of it and recognize what we actually want to communicate, separate from what our micro reactions might be. Let's see. Let's hop over. I'm going to hold actually all of these anonymous questions till the end, which we're getting towards, but we'll just do like one big Q&A section at the end. When we replace those moments of judgment where we other, where we say you are different and weird and gross, when we replace those moments and those gut reactions with trust, with support, with curiosity, with questions, with, I need a minute to figure out how I feel about that. Shame cannot continue to thrive because shame is something that is only going to thrive in silence. So when it comes to talking about sex, we have to actually say, I don't know how I feel about that, or I'm having a gut reaction about that, but I'm not quite sure what it actually means yet. I'm not really sure where we're going with this, right? We have to replace the othering with curiosity when it comes to sex. And when we do that, we're going to make it a lot easier to have those conversations, even when we feel nervous, even when we're having a gut reaction of judgment and saying like, I think that's pretty weird, right? We're going to find a better way to say, thank you for telling me that. I'm not into that thing. But I appreciate you telling me. And, obviously you can feel free to do that in masturbation or in your other sexual experiences. But when we're together, that's not something that I want to engage in. That's not something I want to try. And that's just setting a boundary. It's not shame. It's not saying that's gross, that's wrong, I don't like it. It's just, I don't like it. It's not for me. It can be for you, and that's okay. So when it comes to building trust, we have a few different things that we can do. First is just practicing communication. So not assuming that you have to be a perfectionist, that you have to do everything exactly right the first time, right? We can actually just say like, ooh, let's take these small opportunities to talk about what I want. So earlier when we said figure out what the problems are outside of the bedroom, if you have a hard time speaking up in your friend group about the movies you want to watch together or where you want to get delivery food from or what you want to do in the weekend, actually practice advocating for what you want. That might mean that you might need to like text yourself and be like, no, I really don't want Thai takeout again. I've had Thai takeout 4 days in the past 2 weeks. It's just like, it's too much. I want something else, right? You can actually type that out to yourself and then be like, Ray, I don't want Thai takeout. No, I'm not really feeling that tonight. Can we do this other place instead? Or if you really want to go there, I'm going to order food from this other place because it's just like, I've had too much pad CU for the past few days. I can't do it anymore. You can practice in those small moments. It doesn't all have to be a big conversation about orgasms. It can be small opportunities to set boundaries, to communicate about the things that you want, about the things that you like, and about the things that you don't like. Build up that comfort advocating for yourself in other contexts and hearing what other people have to say, responding to what other people have to say in those contexts before you jump straight into talking about sex. The next thing you can do is affirm boundaries. So I'm going to give you a worksheet to help you actually write out some of your boundaries in a way of talking about what you deserve and what is important to you. But you can also be supportive of your friends and your partners' boundaries, right? So if someone says like, ooh, I don't want to do that, I'm really not feeling that, instead of being like, are you serious? Come on. Like, we're all doing this. Just come do it. Like, that's cool. Is there something you want to do instead? Or that's fine. I still really want to go do this thing. So I'm going to go do it. But do you want to meet up in a couple of hours? What's going to feel good for you, right? Actually saying like, thank you for telling me that you're not into this thing, or thank you for telling me you are into this thing. I really appreciate it. Affirming how other people communicate then creates a cycle where we feel more comfortable actually just engaging in it and just practicing it to begin with. We can use safe words and gestures. So you might think of this as something that you exclusively do in a BDSM or a kink context, but safe words and gestures are helpful for many types of situations, whether it's kinky sex or not kinky sex or sex at all. For those of you who know, you probably are familiar with the concept of safe words, right? If I say banana, everything stops. But safe gestures are helpful, especially for those of you who might be delayed processors or who know that you have a speech impediment or you have a language impairment, something where it might be harder for you to find that word in the moment. So safe gestures might say like, nope, we're done here. We're like, really need to stop. Safe words and gestures are just quick ways to communicate either I need to stop completely or I need to slow down. And sometimes people will have a word or a gesture for slow down and some for stop, but it will all depend on just people in general and what their own needs are. So you can use these in social contexts, right? Like this is a great tool to actually use at parties if you're like, all right, everyone, mutually we're agreeing on a safe word. And if somebody says this to us, it means that I really don't want to be talking to this person anymore. They're making me feel uncomfortable. Spill a drink on them, get me out of the situation, right? So maybe that word is biochem or orangutans or sparkling water, whatever. Something you and all of your friends are going to easily remember, right? And then that might be your social context safe word. If you hear me say, hey, I really would like a sparkling water right now, then your friends know, let's find a way to end the situation. Let's distract and break up whatever is happening here because this person is getting bad vibes and they're not liking it, right? Something is making them uncomfortable. You can also think about safe words in arguments, right? So if you're somebody who like, you'll all keep going and you'll keep going and you'll keep fighting and you'll just like spin yourself around in circles, you might have a safe word for arguments. So if someone calls banana and you're like, we'll take a break. Let's take an hour break. We're going to go walk it off and just get some of this energy out. We're not talking about this anymore. Ditto with gestures, right? These can come into many different contexts. And you might use the same ones in a sexual setting as you do in a non-sexual setting. Ultimately, it's totally up to you. You just want it to be something easy to remember for both yourself and for your partners and something easy to identify, right? So like playing with your hair, not a great safe gesture because you could just be playing with your hair. Someone might not think of it, right? But if you are doing a very specific thing, like you unclasp a necklace and then like you put it back on, right? You're like, oh, this got really tangled in my hair. I have to fix this. That could be a safe gesture out in a social setting, for example. But come up with these, mutually agree on them in advance. We've already talked through the yes, no, maybe lists. Those are those surveys that you can do. We should try it and Spicer. Those are great ways to build in like, hey, we can talk about this. We have a context. We've got a scaffolding. We can actually just build this around. Some people use BDSM or kink practices to build trust. Again, this isn't going to be for everybody, right? If you know you're not into kinky things, then cool, you're not into kinky things. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people use it because BDSM and kink relies on a framework of risk-aware and consensual. And so that might mean that when we are processing through certain situations, right, we actually talk a little bit more about the risk. Okay. I really want to go get Thai food again tonight, even though I've gotten it 5 times in the past week. But I know that's a little risky because it costs about 3 times as much for me to get that Thai food as it does for me to go to this other place that's on campus. So can I actually afford it? Yeah, I'm okay with that risk, right? So we're actually talking about like what the risk is. So people can opt in and say like, yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with spending 3 times as much as we do on this other thing. So you don't actually have to be practicing kink or practicing BDSM to bring in that risk-aware and consensual component. And then just make it a habit, right? So with your friend group, I know that y'all are talking about this in the chat right now, but actually like talk about these things, build up the structure, practice affirming your friends when they set boundaries and say, I'm not feeling that, right? Or if somebody shows judgment, say, hey, looks like you're having a gut reaction. You want to talk about it? What's going on over there? What's happening? And actually bring in that space to say, it's okay to talk about emotions. It's okay to talk about the things that you want. It's okay to talk about the things you're not into. I appreciate that you are just communicating those things with me in general and that you're letting me in, because communication is an act of vulnerability, right? And so you can do that in any type of partnership, whether it is an exclusively sexual partnership, a sexual and romantic partnership, a friendship, a roommate situation. All of these opportunities are ways to build up trust and to also build up your own communication muscles, because it's something that takes practice. And on that note, practice is going to make a lot better, a lot easier. So for the next, we'll say 3 to 5 minutes, I want you to tell me in the chat about your ideal potato situation. What is your favorite type of potato? What types of things are on it? What do you love about the potato? And if somebody is like, this is my favorite potato, and you're like, that potato sounds amazing, I want you to ask about them. So go ahead in the chat, start telling me about your favorite potatoes. Now, I will start. This is really hard for me because I have many different forms of potato that I like. But right now, I'm really feeling French fries that are like shoestring thin. And if they're covered in Cajun seasoning, or even like sometimes curry powder can be really amazing on a French fry. I really love that. So I want to know, for the person who said French fries, what type of French fry? Steak fries? McDonald's French fries? What's on the French fries? How crispy are they? Tell me more about them. Baked potatoes with bacon and fries. So fries on the potato, you're double potatoing right now. Am I interpreting that correctly? How is the bacon? Is it like a mushy bacon? Are you a crunchy bacon? Are you a bacon bits person? Tell me how you like your mashed potatoes. So I love a good mashed potato, all creamy. What types of things go into that mashed potato? What ingredients are you adding in? Chips. What kind of chips? What type of chips do you like? What are your favorite? Scalloped potatoes hit different. Scalloped potatoes do hit different. Curly fries hit different. They're not my fave, but I appreciate that you like them. How do you like your curly fries? Do you like them crispy? Do you like them soft? Any particular seasoning on them? Skinny fries with cheese and bacon and mozzarella. When you say cheese and mozzarella, those are both cheeses. So are there two different types of cheeses, or is it like cheese sauce and mozzarella? I'd love some clarity. Crispy as fuck too. Crispy things, delicious. Chili cheese fries with bacon. Okay, so we're not going for like a vegetarian chili here, I'm assuming, because you're also talking about the bacon. Mashed potatoes, but fried. I just saw a recipe for some delicious smashed potatoes, which are kind of like fried mashed potatoes, sort of. But yeah, I like that. Cookout Cajun fries. Thank you. You've named a restaurant. We've got some specificity here. Let's see. I'm an absolute whore for crispy fries with bay seasoning. Yes, Old Bay seasoning on crispy French fries. I'm here for it. I love it. Let's see. Crispy bacon bits are going onto the potatoes. Sweet potato waffle fries with a light layer of chunky salt. No condiments. I love the specificity that you brought here. I don't know about my mashed potatoes. My mom makes it. Ask your mom what she's putting in those potatoes. This could be critical information for you at some point. I love potatoes so fucking much. This is not we are legitimately talking about potatoes right now. This is just what we're talking about, I promise. A baked potato with so much cheese, butter, broccoli, yogurt. Yes, chives too. What kind of cheese do you like on your potato? Tell me. We're adding heavy whipping cream and butter to the mashed potatoes. Yes, good ingredients. Crispy thin fries with not a lot of salt, but also curry sauce. Ooh, I love that. I love that. That excites me. Rosemary red skin potato wedges that are crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. Yes, rosemary and red potatoes are such an amazing and classic combination. A hot sweet potato with extra butter, a very small amount of brown sugar, and some marshmallow on top. I love that. I love that. Very sweet. We've got a dessert potato happening here. Waffle fries with sea salt on them and no dipping sauces. Hey, there was somebody else who talked about fries with sea salt and no dipping sauces. That person is your new best friend. Go find them. Old school Pennsylvania Dutch mashed potatoes, no skins with the mush down center for a chuck roast gravy volcano. I love the mental image here. I love this. I am from southeastern Pennsylvania, so I relate to this a lot, even though it is not how I make my potatoes anymore. Potato pancakes. Tell me about your potato pancakes. Do you put chives on them? Do you have onions in them? Is there applesauce involved? Sour cream? What is going into these potato pancakes? I want to know. Let's see, cheese whiz and mozzarella. Yes. Okay, so we've got double cheeses. This is for the double cheese potato. So we've got 2 different types of cheese. Chick-fil-A waffle fries. There are a lot of waffle fries happening here. Colby Jack cheese. All right. If you saw someone whose potato you were into, go find them and go ask them questions about it. I know this is hard for you because you can't, I don't think, see everyone's full names right now. Pierogi absolutely counts as a way to have potatoes. It is a form of potato. It counts. Absolutely. Beer cheese. Beer cheese is an option for a potato. That's a nice, that's a nice fall option. All right. Find somebody's potato that you are into and ask questions. And if you can't remember them, just be like, at person who talked about cheese whiz and mozzarella on potato, I have a follow-up. Here is my follow-up. Because I have follow-ups. I had follow-ups for a lot of you. And I bet that y'all have commentary on other people's potatoes. Ooh, caramelized onions on the pierogies. My dog's best friend is a dog, and her name is Pierogi. So every time that you all say pierogi, I think of a small dog who's named Pierogi. And pierogi does not like caramelized onions as a dog because dogs can't have onions. But as a human, I love pierogies with caramelized onions. Homemade pierogies, okay. With enough butter to give you heart disease. Yeah, we've got to really commit to the amount of butter that is going on. Beer cheese is so good. What are the things? So for a person who just said beer cheese is so good, I would love to know, what do you put beer cheese on? Tell us in the chat. What are your favorite things to put it on? French fries. What kind of French fries? Beer cheese with pretzels. Beer cheese with pretzels. It's so good. It's such a good combination. Like a big soft pretzel. Like a big soft baked hot pretzel. I'm going to need to hear more about this. Rosemary redskin potato wedges that are crisp on the outside and soft on the inside. It sounds so good. Is it baked? Rosemary redskin potato wedge person, please answer this other person's question. They would like to know about your potatoes. I like to use beer cheese as a dipping sauce for fries, pretzels, any type of snack food, really. I'm assuming you meant beer cheese. We've got a lot of different conversations about cheese and potatoes going on here. So I'm making assumptions, which is what we're actively not supposed to be doing. All right, take 1 more minute. We're going to continue to give potato commentary for 1 more minute. All right, those oven roasted rosemary red potatoes. It is oven baked with a bit of olive oil and salted generously. Yes, when I bake these, love to do them for a really long time. And at the end, you like flip everything over, do a quick 30 seconds under the broiler just to do some last little crispiness. That's how I like to do my red potatoes. We'll definitely know who went to the seminar a half hour after it ends with how many Vixens flood sheets. Yeah, I really love, I'm gonna want to be tagged in photos of potatoes. Just y'all are eating chips, y'all are eating fries. I would like to see the images later. Thank you so much. How did it feel to actually just talk about the way that you like something pretty ubiquitous like potatoes? Right? Like potatoes are in a lot of places. Potatoes are in a lot of forms. How did it feel to actually talk about how you really like them? And thank you for humoring me with the potato talk. Maybe next time we'll do pizza. All the enthusiasm felt good. It felt very comforting. And potatoes are a comfort food for a lot of people, right? Refreshing and non-judgmental. Yeah, right? Like we can all just shout about the ways that we like potatoes. And for the most part, people are just like, tell me more about that potato. I'd never considered potatoes that way. Are pierogies a potato? Right? It gives us the opportunity for curiosity to figure out how we feel and to get to know people in a different way, right? And also practice specificity. When we, like the very first thing here was just French fries. There's so many types of French fries. What types of French fries do we want? What types of French fries do we like? And talking about sex shouldn't be all that different from how we just talked about how we like our potatoes, right? Be more specific as we can. If we don't know, say, I don't know, I'm open to suggestions for how people make their rosemary roasted potatoes. We have options here. Do we bring garlic in? Do we caramelize onions with them? Do we do a lemon butter sauce? Try it, see how it feels. We can bring that same energy to our conversations about sex when we bring in specificity, when we bring in curiosity, and when we manage our judgment and use tools, because those are the keys. Those are the key ways that we can make conversations about sex flow a lot more easily. And if I'm being honest, how we can make a lot of other conversations flow pretty easily too. So start with lower vulnerability conversations like this. Start with the things that feel a little bit easier to access, whether that's potatoes or homework or folding laundry in your dorm or whatever it is. And practice understanding people. Practice hearing what someone has to say and saying, this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you actually meant? This is what I'm picturing when you say 2 different types of cheese. And build up your fluency from there. Build up your confidence from there, because practice makes better, not perfect. We're not going to be perfect at communication, and that is okay. Instead, let's aim for compassion, let's aim for curiosity, and let's aim to lower our judgment just a little bit. So that is it for slides for tonight for workshop 1 of 4, Sweet Briar, but I am going to answer the anonymous questions y'all have sent in, so hang tight with me. Now, I'm gonna also drop your link to the website that has your resources on it in just a second. All right. When people ask if you get an email with this link, this is the link that you joined to get here today. That's the link that your slides and resources are going to go on. I will also email Devin Serrano later with the information when your website is updated. So you'll get the slides, you'll get the recording, you'll get all the things. And critically, if you have entered the raffle, which I hope you all have at this point, but if you haven't, if you were someone who came late, I'm gonna put the link again. I will be emailing you by the end of the night tonight about your raffle prize. You will have to answer me by the end of the day on Friday. Otherwise, someone else is getting your prize. You lose all claim to whatever it is that you've won. So make sure you check your email throughout the rest of the week. Now, to your questions. First one, how do you ask for more care or more sexy time without being pushy? So I think these are actually 2 different things. If you want to be having sex or sexual experiences more frequently, I would recommend starting with talking about what desire feels like for you, talking about how you want to connect more with your partner. Like, what are the actual reasons for wanting sex more? Is it, I'm feeling like really high levels of desire for you, and I would love if we could like bring more physical connection into that space? Or is it because you're maybe feeling pressure to be having sex more? So think about like what that actual reason is. And it doesn't have to be just one particular type of sex, right? We'll talk about that more in February's workshop in For Pleasure's Sake. But there are many different ways that we can have pleasurable sexual experiences, and they don't all just have to be that one script. but ultimately leading with like what the reason is, not just I want to have more sex. Why aren't we having more sex? And saying like I want to connect with you more. I am like feeling really high levels of desire. How are some ways that we can bring more physical connection into play? If you're thinking about more care, right, then that might mean that there's a tone shift that needs to happen. And so it might be saying, I'm really feeling like I need this thing to feel a little bit more supported, to feel a little bit more secure and comfortable, or to feel like really connected with my body and with what we're doing. So could you do this, this, and this? How do you feel about that? Right. So if that means I'd really love if we cuddled more, it just helps me feel more secure and connected to you when we have like physical touch. Can we make sure we intentionally bring that in? Can you initiate it more? Because right now I feel like I'm always initiating and it makes me feel a little self-conscious. So there are plenty of ways to bring these things up without it being pushy. And I hope that, you know, today, one of the things that you've taken away is that talking about our boundaries isn't being pushy when we lead with our need and we move forward with compassion and with curiosity. And if our partner is just like, it's so annoying that you asked for that, you're really annoying, and this is just like not doing it for me, it's probably worth reevaluating if that's somebody we want to continue partnering with in whatever context. Because if someone isn't willing to consider your needs, or at least say, I hear you, this is why this like isn't really on the table for me, and if they're not willing to engage in that conversation openly, then it probably says a lot about how they're going to treat other aspects of the relationship. So something to consider. How can you communicate what you want without hurting your partner's feelings? So this comes up a lot when people are like, I know that I could get closer to an orgasm if you would move half an inch that way, right? I think one of the things to think about here is, are we having this conversation during sex or after sex or in a non-sexual context entirely? So if we are in the moment in bed, then one of the things we could do is be like, could you move over a little bit? I'm feeling really good. And if you put your hand here, yep, that's really great. Please continue. So we can actually just make it a playful thing instead of being like, you're not doing it right, move over here. And we might feel that level of frustration, right? But the way that we actually communicate it is different. If our partner is like, no, I got this, it's worth a pause and saying, I can feel what's happening in my body, and I'd like to create a mutually pleasurable experience. And that is going to mean that if I'm telling you I'm feeling something, that you actually have to listen to me, right? You have to hear what I'm saying. If I say move over half an inch to the left, I mean move over half an inch to the left. I know where I'm feeling things in my body. And yeah, you can absolutely guide them, right? That's going to make sure that people actually know what's happening. And people might have a gut reaction of feeling embarrassed or feeling like, oh, I'm missing something. I've like done something wrong. And that's where having those conversations outside of the bedroom is really helpful, right? We're learning about each other's bodies, and I don't expect you to know everything about me, and I don't expect to know everything about you. I would love to have an open line of communication. How do you want to get that feedback in the moment when I know that there's something that I want? How do you want me to talk to you? Do we want to have code words? Do you want me to just move your hand or move you over a little bit? Do you want me to pause you and give you more detailed instructions? You can actually have that conversation about what that looks like. And hurt feelings might happen, right? And that's where we just have that open conversation of, here's what I'm trying to communicate. What I don't want to be saying is, you're bad in bed, you're a terrible partner. What I'm saying is, here's how we can create more mutually pleasurable experiences. And I think that's something that like we're all here for and we all want, right? And so that's the energy you can bring in. But we'll talk more about that in the For Pleasure's Sake workshop in February. If I'm insecure about my body or feel nervous for someone new to see my body, what are some ways to work through that? Honestly, being open about it is one of the things that can be really helpful. So if we say like, hey, I'm like really excited to do things with you, but I want to give you a heads up. I have a lot of body self-consciousness, and I feel like sometimes it gets in the way of me being like totally present. So here are some things that you can do to help me feel a little bit more comfortable. How do you feel in your body? Is there anything I should know about you? And so that's some ways that you can do that. The other things you can think about are like, how do you style yourself and your context that helps you feel more comfortable, more able to be present in the moment without worrying about what your body looks like, feels like, smells like, whatever. Body self-consciousness is really common. It's something that people worry about a lot. A lot of people worry about what their genitals look like, or that like their body is going to make body rolls, or that like their hip is going to crack, or, you know, whatever it is. And a lot of us have those worries, but when we just openly name them, our partners can be more in tune to them and can actually say like, okay, here's how I can support you if you start feeling that way, right? Or, all right, what does that mean? Is there some way that we can help you feel a little bit more comfortable? So name that thing. It can be really hard. You might feel uncomfortable or you might be embarrassed. And if your partner is just like, you have an amazing body, there's nothing to be self-conscious about, then thank you. I appreciate that. I still am self-conscious though. So can we talk about some ways to make me feel comfortable in the moment, or to give some affirmation in the moment? Because I think that would be really helpful for me. So that's one way to handle a comment response. How do you discuss anal? I have a video in my You Deserve Good Sex series that has some tips for how to start talking about anal if it's something you're curious about. But what I would ultimately say is remember that there are many different types of things that count as anal play. And so if you are curious about it, one of the ways you can first bring it up is through indirect communication. So saying like, oh, I found this article online about this thing, like, what are your thoughts? Or if you're watching a TV show or a movie where anal play is coming up, then like you can be like, oh, I'd never really thought about that before, or I've been thinking about this lately. Like, how do you feel? You know, that can be one way to kind of indirectly start that conversation. When it comes to more directly discussing it, we have to actually come in with a plan and be prepared to communicate what we want to communicate. And I have 2 videos in my You Deserve Good Sex series about that. The first is just what you need to know about anal play in general. And the second is how to bring up something new with your partner. And I'll link to that whole series on your event website. Let's see. If a partner has finished, but I have not, and the partner does not ask if I have finished, what are some ways to communicate that? Hey, love that you're done. I'm still wanting to continue. And if orgasm is your goal here, right? I haven't reached orgasm yet. And I would really like to. I think I'm pretty close. So can we make some stuff happen? Here's what I'm feeling. And if your partner is like, no, I'm done. I'm just done. Okay, well, can I have a couple minutes then so I can masturbate? Because I would really like to feel satisfied. And right now I don't feel satisfied. So we can have partners who set boundaries, right? And are like, I'm not feeling things anymore. But ultimately we want to think about, again, creating that mutually pleasurable experience. And if they're just making assumptions, right, there are a lot of people who believe that orgasms can only happen simultaneously. So they might be really surprised to hear that you don't reach orgasm when they do. They might not even realize that that's like a thing that exists. So you can have that conversation both in the moment, and if it's a repeated pattern, talk about it after of, you know, I feel like my pleasure isn't being prioritized. And that, you know, sex always ends just when you reach orgasm and I'm not getting the opportunity to. So let's talk about flipping the script. And again, if your partner is like, that's a you problem, not a me problem, then it's worth reevaluating that partnership. And if we want to continue partnering with them, because that's somebody who isn't willing to consider your perspective and consider your pleasure in a situation. How do you get comfortable with talking during sex? Because I want to, but get scared. The really unfortunate thing that I'm going to tell you is that it gets easier the more you do it. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. One is just by being more vocal with your sounds, and that can be kind of like starting to ease your way in. So that might mean that you maybe make different sounds than you usually do, or if you like try to silence yourself, maybe release that like volume cap a little bit. It might mean starting off with small things. Yes, I love when you do this. This feels so good, right? And starting off with something like that can then lead up to the things that might feel more intense, right? Using language that might feel more intense. But in the meantime, start with those like smaller, low scale things. Dip your toes in before you wade the whole body in. Could you possibly talk about body image and sex? I'm someone who loves the idea of sex and I'm very comfortable talking about it, but I haven't done anything with anyone because of how I fear people may perceive my body, because I'm not the typical beauty standard, even when I've made it abundantly clear that I don't have the beauty standard type body. What I will say is that, yes, beauty standards exist in the United States and in the world. The thing that is really important is what is your standard of beauty, what feels normal and good to you. We can talk a lot about like our media bubble and the types of media we engage in. So I really recommend, like, you know, if, for example, you are someone who is a wheelchair user, follow people on Instagram and TikTok who are also wheelchair users, just to normalize seeing that and be like, yeah, these people are attractive too, right? Like that means I can be attractive because this person is attractive and they're talking about sex, and that means I can be too. Because if the standard of things that you're seeing are people who look, you know, one or two ways, it's really hard to feel confident in ourselves in that. And ultimately, we need to be in a place of like, I am desirable, I am worthy of sex, I'm worthy of pleasure. And that's going to start from being in a place of saying, my body is worthwhile. I really recommend the book, The Body Is Not an Apology. It's actually one of your prizes for today. So maybe again, this is an anonymous question. I have no idea who sent this, but it's one of your prizes for today. And even if you don't win it, The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. It's a spoken word poem, but it's also a book and a workbook. And I really highly recommend it because it talks a lot about how you can start appreciating your body for what it does and appreciating it for its sensuality and its sexuality, and saying like, yes, I am worthy of good things, even if I don't fit this common and extremely narrow beauty standard. Because remember, beauty standards are designed to exclude people, not to include people. They're designed to make you feel like you have to buy things or like you have to fit into a certain type of capitalist mold. The reality is that most of us aren't going to fit into every single one of those categories. So we need to redefine what beauty and attraction means to us. And that's also going to go into that affirming boundaries thing that we talked about a bit ago. How do I explain to my partner that orgasm isn't always the end goal of sex? We are going to talk about this so much in February's workshop, in the For Pleasure's Sake workshop. But there are a lot of things that you can find online talking about pleasure-focused sex versus goal-oriented sex. Fundamentally, goal-oriented sex basically is like, we are having sex to have an orgasm. We are having sex to make a baby. We are having sex for money, for whatever the reason is. There's an end goal, and sex is just like the vehicle to get there. When we think about pleasure-focused sex, we think about how are we all having a mutually good time. That might involve orgasms, or it might involve just a sense of satisfaction and being like, I'm good, I'm done. And sometimes people put a lot of pressure on orgasm, and the more pressure gets put on orgasm, the harder it actually is to experience them. It's a weird like catch-22 of orgasms. So what I would say is focus the attention on creating mutually pleasurable experiences and deprioritizing orgasm as like the exclusive thing that has to be a marker of pleasure. One strategy you can use is set a timer for like 2 minutes. And for those 2 minutes, you guys can do whatever you want. Enjoy each other's bodies. And when the timer goes off, you can either stop or you can say, let's do another 2 minutes, right? And just focus on what is happening for those 2 minutes. You're not trying to make an orgasm happen within 2 minutes. You're just focusing on how you feel, what feels enjoyable, and maximizing opportunities for pleasure in the moment within whatever that timer is. And that's one way to kind of like reset expectations of like, oh, things can be good and pleasurable even if orgasm isn't the thing that's happening or what we're working towards. I kind of want to open up the relationship sexually because we're in a long distance relationship. I don't know how to bring it up. Any tips? So what I would really recommend is being clear on what it is that you're asking for. So if you are saying, I want to open up the relationship sexually, what might that mean? What might those boundaries look like? So go into the conversation and plan intentionally that conversation with a framework of what you're thinking of. It's hard being in a long distance relationship, but I feel very bonded to you. I want to maintain a romantic connection, but I also want to have more in-person sexual experiences, which that's just not possible for us right now. I'd love to talk about opening up our relationship so that we can each have separate sexual experiences, but I'd love to talk about your feelings and what boundaries you might have there. Here are some things I'm thinking. And that might mean, not having sex with the same person more than twice. That might mean committing to certain STI testing intervals. I have an article that should be coming out about this towards the end of the month, so I'll add it to your resource sheet as well once that publishes. But you want to go into it saying, here are kind of the baseline things of what I'm thinking. What do you think? Do you want to do you need some time to think about it and give the opportunity for that time? Because your partner might have some gut reactions, right? And then figure out how you're going to check in with each other. So there are a lot of great resources online if you look into ethical non-monogamy or how to bring up ethical non-monogamy with a partner. Those are some places to look towards. And that is it for anonymous questions for the night tonight. Thanks so much for being here and hanging out with me for 2 hours, Sweet Briar. I super appreciate it. Next week, same time, same place, literally this internet room, we are going to be doing the Playing Safely workshop. We're going to be talking about all of the different realms of sexual safety. I am not going to be putting condoms on bananas. I will be putting condoms on dildos. There will be many things, but we'll also be talking about dental dams and internal condoms and emotional safety and toy safety, product safety, how we can actually communicate. We'll have communication components in this as well. So if you were wondering about the logistics of what it means to be in sexually safe situations, come join me next week. You'll get the info in your email address, but literally it's Wednesday, it's at 8 p.m., it's at this link. Everything is the same. Keep an eye on your email for the next 30 minutes and into tomorrow so you can figure out if you want a raffle prize. Otherwise, I will see y'all next week, Sweet Briar. I will see you next semester even, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Welcome to the new school year. Thanks for being here with me. Have a good night.